Quote, "We'll be in school, but we won't stop fighting to protect our students." OSSTF radio ads send a clear message. The government is bargaining in bad faith, and the secondary school teachers will continue to fight to change that. Joining us now, Ken Coran. He's the president of the OSSTF, and we welcome you here for your first visit on the agenda and to TVO. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
Here's what Martin Redcon wrote in the Toronto Star just a few days ago. I'm going to read that, and then we'll come out and talk after this. When the Ontario Cabinet revealed its hard line last February, some of the major teachers' unions bolted from the bargaining table. To their credit, the Catholic teachers' unions made the best of a bad hand, improvising a creative negotiated solution by giving up 3 paid PD days, amounting to a 1.5% pay cut. It was a testament to the hard-headed bargaining, unlike the rote sloganeering by the Elementary Teachers Federation of Ontario. By refusing to negotiate with the province and calling strike votes for next month, ETFO gave McGuinty a pretext to intervene, albeit a flimsy one. The Liberals now claim they must act urgently to prevent ETFO and public high school teachers from pocketing any automatic increases if their contracts, quote, roll over upon expiry September 1st. So the question then becomes, I know you're not ETFO, you're secondary school teachers, not elementary teachers, but your two unions are the ones who have yet to settle. Do you have only yourselves to blame for the predicament you're in today? I
don't believe so at all. And I think we should be clear, this does not apply just to teachers. So there's a third union involved in the controversy right now, which is CUPE. So it's teachers and support staff, all educational workers in public elementary and secondary schools. So it's far bigger than sometimes the public has been led to believe. The term bolted away from a table I find a little disheartening. In fact, we did have a meeting with the Minister of Education prior to going to the bargaining table. And the whole process was flawed from the beginning, and we could get into that later on. But in a process where there's no rules, it becomes difficult to really decide anything. But the first time we did meet with the government negotiators, and those were the 3 lawyers from McCarthy Tetro, which sets a tone immediately. These aren't people well-versed in the education sector. We did propose a deal for settlement to them. And what that deal was, it was a 4-year proposal. Something that we believed would achieve peace and stability for a 4-year period, which we believed the government would be very interested in.
What were the money terms over the 4 years?
The money terms were a wage freeze for the first 2 years and a cost of living increase for years 3 and 4.
And why would they turn that down? That gives them the 2 years freeze that they wanted.
Exactly. So, you know, at the start of any bargaining, you put proposals forward. We thought it would be open to discussions. We also proposed something that would address an unfunded liability problem, because the government's financial concerns right now are basically a cash flow problem, which the wage freeze would address, as well as unfunded liability concerns. The dollars that a school board must have in its bank to cover some of these liabilities. So what we proposed, and this was way back in April, so we weren't not bolting by any means, was a provincial benefit plan that would transfer liability from the government, from school boards, to the employees, i.e. the unions. And if that were applied sector-wide, that would achieve a savings of $419 million of unfunded liability. Well, we're still uncertain, and those are the questions we've been asking ever since April.
But if you offered them 2 years of freezing wages, movement up the grid?
No. Yes, movement up the grid. We wanted movement up the grid.
Ah, okay. Well, that's kind of a no-go for them.
Yeah, and I don't understand why, because when any worker starts, you know, they go into a job understanding the terms of the collective agreement. And these newer members are starting families, they're buying houses, they're buying cars, they're buying furniture. You know, they're really investing in the economy, and this defined increase to them was something they were counting on. So it was really, you know, almost a strip or a takeaway or stealing money from what they believed they deserve, and was fairly negotiated.
You know, the government's position on this, though, Mr. Coran, has been that we had to pass this back-to-work legislation for 2 reasons. Number one, we couldn't risk having that $400+ million worth of added expenditure to teacher salaries come in. And number two, we had to be sure you guys would be there in the classroom to start with. What's your reaction to that?
Well, we stated time and time again that our members would be in the classrooms in September. There was never any doubt of that. And very recently, they were using the fact that we were going to take strike votes as ammunition, I would say, to justify their position. And we even decided to delay any strike votes, to postpone them, just to show the public that we were serious about this, that we would be in the schools, we would be fulfilling our duties, and improving student achievement, just as always.
Okay, but my recollection is, you correct me if I'm wrong, my recollection was you gave those undertakings to the government after they tabled this bill.
No, that's not true.
You gave it to them before.
Yeah, we stated all along from day one with regards to strike votes. A strike vote is something that's guaranteed under the Ontario Labour Relations Act. And this whole process is somewhat in contravention to the Labour Relations Act. We said a strike vote is designed to do one thing: determine your members' support for a particular position. It doesn't mean you're going to strike. It doesn't mean a strike is in the plans. It means you're gauging your members' support, and that's what the strike vote was designed to do.
But it is a move from DEFCON 4 to DEFCON 3, if you like. I mean, it gets you closer to war.
Sure, but you know, under the Labour Relations Act, before you could get to the DEFCON system, you know, you would have to apply for a conciliator, which is a 10-day period to have a conciliator appointed. And then after the conciliator is appointed, you would have to apply for a no board report.
Okay, so in other words,
which
it wasn't
17 more days.
It wasn't a provocation in your view.
It was certainly not an antagonistic or a confrontational situation.
Okay. The other thing we've heard, and admittedly, the kids are all back in the class all of a day now, so who knows? I'm not sure how much feedback you've got from your classrooms either. An angry teacher is not good for kids. Teachers will be angry because of this contract brouhaha, and therefore the conventional wisdom is they'll take it out on the kids by not doing those shows, by not coaching the football team anymore, et cetera, et cetera. Yes? No?
Well, that's all an individual's decision to make. I mean, I don't believe that any of our members would do anything to discredit a student in the classroom. I mean, they have duties defined in the Education Act, and they will fulfill those duties. You know, what you're talking about with regards to school activities such as band, drama, my favorite, of course, football, and all other extracurricular activities, you know, it's an individual's decision whether they want to participate in that or not participate. It's voluntary.
Right, but you have kind of, I mean, pretty prominently on the op-ed pages of a newspaper today said, we're not telling you not to, right? Go do it if you want. Isn't that what you said?
That's our position right now, absolutely.
Okay.
I mean, an individual's decision to participate in a voluntary activity is their decision.
Have you heard any feedback from the classrooms yet as to what percentage of your union members are doing it? Yeah.
Well, it's still too early in the year. I mean, a lot of teams have already started, and those coaches are out there. But there are some that are reconsidering. They're very, I mean, this legislation it didn't come out of the blue, but it was a surprise that they would actually start to pursue it. It was always a threat. Way back in February, the Premier said they would resort to anything to make sure they got their way. So it was a threat. They carried through on the threat, and you know what they did was they antagonized, and they somewhat became a bully in this situation, I would say. So people are reacting. People will fight for principle, and there is very much a principle embedded in this legislation.
What's the principle?
Free collective bargaining. I mean, it doesn't matter who I've talked to, whether they be a school support staff worker or a teacher. They believe in the principle of free collective bargaining, that you should be able to resolve issues on your own and not have the interference or dictation or dictate by someone else.
Okay, but help me with this here, because their legislation proposed is called the Putting Students First Act.
Bit of a misnomer.
Okay, but you've just told us your top priority here is the right to freely collectively bargain an agreement.
Correct.
If you're a parent with a kid in the classroom and you're looking at this, you see one side saying we're putting students first, you're seeing the other side saying we want the right to determine our contract in a free and collective bargaining situation. Who do I think speaks for me?
Well, there's one missing piece of the puzzle.
Tell us.
And the missing piece is there's a Labour Relations Act that defines how you should bargain, and the two bargaining agents that should be having these discussions are the school board trustees, those locally elected people that are entrusted with the well-being of the school system in their area, and the unions. And it's those two parties that have historically been able to resolve issues. And it's those two parties that I believe still can resolve some of the problems, addressing the financial needs that the government has identified.
Okay, but we're in a very political world here. Right?
Absolutely. That's the problem right now.
Big time. Well, I mean, you got elected, she got elected, you both have your constituents that you have to satisfy. And she would say, my constituents are the parents and and their students, and you would say your constituents are the teachers.
And the students.
And the students. Really?
Well, people don't get into the teaching profession and work in schools unless they care about students. It's almost a calling. It's a profession. It's not a job, it's a profession.
Let me talk to you about this word partner, because the government has often said we want to come to an agreement with our teaching partners and our education partners. When Dalton McGuinty put that YouTube video up there, basically explaining what he wanted out of you guys, what was the reaction?
Shock.
How come?
Wondering why this would happen. Well, because the process, as I say, that began a process with no rules. And you know, when you raise your family, do you not have family rules? You know, when I was in the classroom, we had classroom rules. When a business operates, a business has rules. I mean, there has to be a process by which things are done to achieve results. And this has been a free-for-all since that YouTube video. It's just been chaos, and who knows why it was designed that way. It boggles the mind.
But you used the analogy of a family. Did you feel that you and the Liberal government were in some respects part of a family?
Well, we would hope to be in a family with whatever government's in power, because we're trying to do what's best for the students. We may have ideas, the government may have ideas. Collaboratively, you work out those ideas in something that could be, you know, implemented.
But you know that, I mean, their view on this is we've basically given you guys everything you've wanted over the past 9 years. Now we're asking for 2 years of freeze, period, full stop, and you're giving us a rough time.
Well, so here's where some of the numbers that are being quoted are somewhat misleading. You know, I did say that we accepted the 2-year wage freeze. The part we had a problem with was the grid movement, which we believe all our newer members are entitled to. So if we could come up with a way, working with the local school boards, to achieve financial savings to pay for that grid movement, should that not have an opportunity to be discussed? And I would say yes. I think most people would say yes. There's a problem, let's talk about it, let's solve it. So that is a process that we're undertaking with the local school boards, is to see if we could find those savings. And if we can, why should we discredit something that was freely collectively bargained? I mean, the fact that you know, roughly 39% of all educational workers are in that grid situation. So 61% of educational workers, when you talk about the wage freeze, that is a true wage freeze. It's this 39% that even have any entitlement to grid movement. So the financial savings, you know, I think they really equate to about $150 million. We believe we could find those savings.
What's your view of the fact that the Catholic teachers and the Francophone teachers came to an agreement?
Sure. I mean, they, you know, in any collective bargaining round, you set baselines. You know what you are willing to accept, what you're not willing to accept. Obviously, for them, it met those baselines. For us, it did not meet those baselines.
It makes your life harder, though, doesn't it?
It certainly does, absolutely, but there's no reason why it should be a one-size-fits-all. I mean, different parts of this province have different concerns, and we believe a one-size-fits-all sometimes just doesn't work. I
would love to have been a bug on the line when you and the head of the Catholic teachers had a phone call after they came to an agreement.
Well, you know, actually the elected president's a friend of mine, and
still?
Well, we haven't had a lot of conversations since then, but
you got to be ticked off about that.
Well, you're trying to goat me right now. I mean, everybody does what they have to do, and you know, his decisions for his organization, they're just not the same as my decisions.
Okay. Let me show this. I'm going to put this up on camera here. You know, there's 2 by-elections going on right now, and there have been a lot of suggestions made that Premier McGuinty's government is trying to look very tough with the teacher unions right now in the hopes of helping him win a couple of by-elections. And here's the Liberal candidate in the riding of Vaughan who says on September 6th, vote to keep our kids in the classroom by voting for me, obviously. Have you guys been enmeshed in some kind of political football here as a result of all of this?
Well, there's speculation this whole timing of the by-elections was a bit of a political agenda. And, you know, I think it's the Liberal government that kind of planted this seed. If we gave the guarantees that everyone would be in the classrooms and the schools would function as normal, you know, why would you use that as some kind of an affront to all these thousands and thousands of educational workers? You're antagonizing them. You're, you know, as I say, it was unnecessary, it was unjust, and I find that problematic, as do our members. You know, don't take advantage of a situation. These are students that deserve the best. There was no threat that there would be any unrest. What's happening with this legislation, though, is, you know, it's raised the temperature significantly. Our members are upset, and they're now getting angry, and they want to do something.
Are they on the ground in Kitchener-Waterloo working for the NDP?
I think a lot of them are.
At your direction or no?
Well, we certainly, we always try to be a little bit bipartisan. You know, we don't pick one particular party, but certainly more of them would be voting and supporting the NDP candidate, who's a former public school board trustee, chair of the Waterloo Board, actually very knowledgeable. So we will support someone that is knowledgeable of educational issues that can voice our concerns.
I'm going to ask you the same last question that I asked the minister when she was just here, and that is, we asked the Ontario Student Trustees Association's Harad Zafari if he'd like to hear you or the minister answer a particular question tonight, and he said, here's the question. If you could go back in time, how would you deal with this process since day one? Would you take the same path?
You know, I met with Harad last Thursday morning, actually. He's a great kid. You know, he's going to be a future leader. He was thinking maybe law in his career, but I'm sure he'll be successful in whatever he does. You know, the problem started right with the YouTube video. And with the former Minister of Education, actually two former ministers, with Kathleen Wynne and Leona Dombrowski, we said to both of those ministers that we wanted to decide and define a process for bargaining. And let's have those rules established so that people can conduct themselves appropriately. And that never did happen for some reason. And when this started to go bad, it continued to go bad. It became almost personal in some situations where people were saying things that I'm not sure if they meant, but they were very accusatory, inflammatory. And you know, when that happens, it's difficult to control.
The teacher unions have been with McGuinty for at least 3 elections in a row now, banging in signs, giving money, providing resources, manpower, if you're allowed to say that anymore, whatever it is, person power, people power. Yeah. Can you conceive of any circumstances under which the teachers will support Dalton McGuinty in the next election in the way they have in the past?
Well, I'm not sure if Dalton McGuinty will even be in the next election, so that's one question I think that only he could answer. You know, I think I was on this program a number of years ago, and the topic was, is Dalton McGuinty truly the education premier? And the answer I gave at that time is only time will tell. And certainly right now there are certainly some concerns, and some of the decisions I think were not wise decisions.
Ken Coran, it's good of you to join us at TVO tonight. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Ken Coran from the Secondary School Teachers Federation.
Support Ontario's public television. Donate at tvo.org.